So the subject of this panel is about challenger brands, and we have three people here, some of whom started as challenger brands and are now quite well established, one of whom still very young, or at least young in your new mission. And this might be sort of the age of the challenger brand. It's so much easier for a young brand to come in and tell a compelling story and win a devoted following. For a variety of reasons, the barriers to entry in different industries has become much lower. You look at the snack business, for example. I mean, every single week it seems like there's some new little player coming out with your organic quinoa, whatever, that's a headache to the bigger, well-established brands. And so I think it's really interesting to talk about both as a new brand who's trying to do something young and different, how you differentiate yourself and get your message out there, and also as a bigger company, how you maintain that sort of authentic relationship with consumers. Authenticity is this funny buzzword. I think people mean different things by it, but everyone agrees that it's really important in marketers' relationships with the consumers they serve. So to talk about this, we have immediately to my left, Greg Fisher, who's the Vice President and Head of Global Brand Marketing for PayPal. Then Amanda Brinkman, who's the Chief Brand and Communications Officer for Deluxe. And Jamie Perry, the VP of Brand and Product Development for JetBlue. So, Jamie, I was hoping actually to speak with you to talk about JetBlue's early days when you were coming onto the market in an industry that, as we all know, these players have been around for a really long time. How how the company tried to get sort of a very different, unique message out there that was heard by consumers, and then follow through with the delivery in the consumer experience.
Sure. So airlines is obviously a long-established industry, lots of consolidation over the last sort of few decades now, and JetBlue is now at a point where it's the fifth largest domestic airline in this country, which sounds impressive till you realize there are only about six. And the top four have 80% of the market, right? So even after 16 years, even after double-digit growth for many of those years, we're still a very, very small player in the space. And in the eyes of many customers, the airline industry is a commodity business, right? You want to go from A to B, you're looking around on price mostly. It's not going to be a particularly exciting or wonderful experience, so you grin and bear it for 3 hours until you get to your nice sunny beach vacation. And in that sort of commodity space, you have two sort of large clusters. You have the legacy players on one end who offer you reach, they'll fly you anywhere, but they all kind of look the same. And then at the other end of the scale, you have the discounters, Spirit, Frontier, used to be Southwest, although they're not much of a discounter anymore, competing purely on price. And we believed at the beginning, and we still believe, that there is a space in between those two models for someone actually focusing on the customer. The big guys continue to focus on the top 1%, the diamond titanium elites who fly however many hundreds of thousands of miles a year. And the price-conscious airlines at the bottom focus purely on the cost-conscious. But we believe there is space in between those two for people who focus on regular folks who fly a reasonable amount, but not so much that they earn the super premium status, but who are prepared to pay a little bit more than they would pay to the discounters for a nicer all-around experience. So at the outset, that was relatively easy. We were founded in 2000, and that was probably the nadir of domestic coach air travel in this country. More seats had gone on planes, all the perks had come off the planes. It was really a pretty unpleasant experience. So even doing things like offering free TV, a bit more leg room, giving you the whole can of soda instead of just a cup of soda and 10 ice cubes was a way to differentiate yourself from what the others were doing. Now, over the years, what's happened is people have started to realize that by offering a little more back, you can actually start to charge a little bit more. So some of those things that we did that made us different in the early days is no longer enough. So we find ourselves continuing to have to find things that matter to customers and stay ahead of the competition.
So lots that I'd love to return to you on, but just to sort of quickly hear a bit to get some more context from our other panelists. Amanda, maybe we could turn to you. So if you could give a bit of background about Deluxe, and then also in the past year, you made the decision as you move forward with the new product to do a very unconventional advertising initiative, i.e. no advertising, and put out these documentaries instead, which is very much sort of on trend in marketing. It seems like there's more and more storytelling going on, both in traditional and untraditional formats. So tell us about that decision and what you're trying to do.
We're in this unique position where we're actually a 100-year-old company, and it's hard to be a 100-year-old company and still be a challenger brand. Those two things don't usually go together. But Deluxe's legacy is in check printing. So we're the largest check printer in the U.S. We created much of how the U.S. moves money. But years ago, as check decline started to become obvious, we managed that portion of our business at a decline. And we started to look at our growth as, what else are we already doing, or what else are we good at? And the fact of the matter is, since 1915, we've been working with small businesses and with financial institutions to help them be successful. And what we really noticed with the small businesses is that they were struggling with the marketing side of their business. So, not many entrepreneurs get into business for themselves because they can't wait to build a website or to design a logo or to figure out what SEO is. And so we started to develop, either acquire or build out those services, and now we offer a full suite of marketing services to small businesses. But everyone still knows us as the check printing company. And so in our 100th year, we needed to do something disruptive, and we needed to do something to establish ourselves in that small business space. And we don't typically, historically, invest a lot in brand awareness, and we're being dramatically outspent by our competitors. So GoDaddy, Constant Contact, Vistaprint, these big spending behemoths. And so we took our paid media budget, which was already small, and decided to cut out a portion of it and invest it in rich content, all with the hope that if we did something purposeful and meaningful that people wanted to spend time with, that we could stretch our spend and reach more people than we could possibly afford to buy in terms of impressions. And so we developed what was called the Small Business Revolution. And it's a documentary series where we went across the country telling the stories of small businesses through films and through photo essays. And it's very lightly branded. We really led with the movement first. We felt like we could own the space of being the champions for entrepreneurs and the champions for small businesses. All of our competitors are cluttering the space with price and product competition, and we're price and product competitive as well. But nobody was owning that space of just taking a time out and celebrating small businesses. And the response has been phenomenal. People have really, followed along with this movement, and we found a voice for ourselves versus just being kind of thought of as that check printing company. We're establishing ourselves in the small business space, but what I'm probably the most proud of is on our way to having that brand awareness association of Deluxe and small business, we did good. We did a lot of good for these small businesses and for the conversation around the importance of small business in this country. And that's what I'm the most proud of, is we achieved marketing goals along the way, but we did it with a purpose and a mission that benefited other people.
And just to be clear, how was this series distributed? Yeah,
so we rolled it out over the course of our 100th year, telling the stories at a regular cadence. So all 100 stories rolled out throughout our 100th year last year in 2015 on a unique platform called the smallbusinessrevolution.org.
Interesting. Look forward to taking a look. But just to talk about PayPal for a minute. So again, this is a company that started certainly incredibly disruptive when you got going, and now has become this giant. You're separate from eBay. You had your first big marketing campaign this year. So when you think about some of the themes that I raised when I was introducing the session, when you think about sort of continuing to be on the cutting edge, continuing to be relevant, particularly in the really fast-moving fintech space, how have you thought about that, and how is your new marketing campaign a response or not to those trends?
Being almost 20 years old in tech is almost dinosaur. But I think when you look at the way that people are thinking about how they move and manage their money, we're truly at the cusp of a revolution. And you think about how it's really changed even the last few years for you today. It will continue to advance. And I think what we've doubled down on is putting people at the center of everything we do. And it's been a fundamental shift in the company over the last year, whether we're talking to product developers, our customer service, and then particularly our marketing. And instead of just spamming everybody with one message, we're really thinking about who we're talking to, what they want, and thinking about it very much in intent-based acquisition. and ensuring that we really are trying to predict what people want from us. And so we're talking to merchants, we're talking to consumers, we're talking to developers who, they hate marketing, and it's an interesting challenge there. But, I think across the board, we've really been thinking about people in a much more genuine way. And so while we're a challenger brand in this new part of this new revolution, we're really framing ourselves as a consumer champion brand. And I think if you look at what we're doing with our campaign today, it truly is putting those people at the center and doing it in a very bold, different way than this category has ever seen.
So I just want to, before we continue with the panel, I'm going to take a quick poll. How many people here consider themselves to be either within company or working with a challenger brand, by show of hands?
Oh, whoops.
And how many consider themselves to be working for a brand that is being challenged? Okay, so slightly more in the latter camp. So maybe returning to JetBlue, you talked about sort of having to up the ante continuously. Yep. What are the ways that you're doing that through marketing, and how does that feed back into the way that you adjust your services within the companies? So.
Yeah, that's a great question. When we were founded, our vision was to bring humanity back to travel, which sounds very highfalutin, but I guess any good mission probably should. But it also speaks, I think, to where the travel industry was 15, 16 years ago, in that it didn't really have any humanity in it. And over the years, that mission has evolved to the point where we now describe it more as inspiring humanity in general, rather than just being related to the travel space. So everything we do, we try to put a touch of humanity into it, whether it is in our communications, in our product, in our service, in any form. If you look at the advertising and the marketing that exists today, I alluded to this earlier with the way the two sort of groups of airlines split. If you look at, and I have a mood board in my office of last couple of years worth of advertising imagery from American, Delta, and United. And if you take a Sharpie and you scrub out the names, you cannot tell them apart. They are identical. They all have photos of the hard product, seats, food, TVs, people looking wistfully out of the window. They usually talk about very rational product drivers, most aircraft with lie flat seats, most daily departures to London, whatever it might be, right? And they don't mention people at all. They're very cold. And then if you look at the other end of the spectrum and you look at Frontier and Spirit and Southwest, all they talk about is price, low fees, price, cheap. So there's not really any humanity in there either. There's no loyalty that comes with cheap. But if you look at what we say and what we do, we try to put our customers and our crew members at the center of everything we say. For example, silly example, but whenever you see an ad of ours that involves someone wearing a JetBlue uniform, that is always one of our people. We never put an actor or an actress in a JetBlue uniform. It's always one of our own crew. Whenever you see sort of customers in JetBlue's marketing, it's one of our customers, right? We try to do a lot of things that actually connect with people. We've done a lot of research over the last few years that show that people who have flown on us love us. They rave about us. I came to the US from Australia in 2010, where I used to work for Jetstar, which is a part of the Qantas group. And it was a low-cost carrier, and it was loathed. It was cheap, and it allowed people to fly wherever they wanted to fly, but it was much like sort of Ryanair in Europe or Spirit here. It was hated. And I remember sort of arriving in New York, and you meet realtors, and you meet sort of all these people when you're sort of moving to a new city, and they ask you what you do, and I said I work for JetBlue. And the number of people who would throw up their arms, go, I love JetBlue, and launch into a story about either something that JetBlue had done for them or a friend or a family member. And I remember thinking, my God, these New York people are effusive. You'd never get Australians or Europeans behaving like this. But it still happens. And it doesn't just happen in New York. It happens in Boston. It happens in Florida. It happens wherever I go. You find these people who just have this amazing emotional connection with the brand. And it comes through the experience they have had or the experience someone they know and trust has had. And it's interesting that the research I alluded to shows that the people who have had that personal experience with us love us. The people who have not had a personal experience with us think we are exactly the same as all the other airlines. don't think there's any difference.
So that gets to a really interesting question of how you are controlling the message. So with all these, especially around travel, this is something that people really like venting about.
Right.
Negatively. I mean, if I have a great experience, frankly, I'll tell my friend, but I'm less likely to write a post about it.
Right.
So with so many different channels in which consumers can share their messages, how do you feel that you can control that? I mean, obviously you can't, but how do you kind of manage that in a way that is in a positive way for your brands? I don't know who wants to take that, but...
Yeah, we've really rethought the way that we're connecting with people. And so a lot of it has to do with completely mapping out customer journeys, and from the first touch all the way through acquisition, through really being an active user. And thinking about it through various segments as well. And so, I think we're in a unique position where they're engaging with us all the time, positive, negative. What's really interesting is, especially in the payment space and digital payments, there's so much opportunity for us to acquire someone and them, spread the message and bring on new customers just because of a great experience. And you think about, you're going out to a restaurant, someone pays the bill. It's so much easier just to send your half of it with PayPal. And that's a great way for us to bring on new customers. And so I think in the social space too, it's another big influencer. And we've reimagined a lot of the way that we engage with people that way, both for acquisition, but also, look, they come to us and they might have a problem. And so we have an increasing number of customer service reps too that are active in social, looking for problems proactively and reaching out and addressing them. And it's part of really thinking about who those people are and what they need to hear from us.
Amanda, maybe you could speak about the sort of buzz and conversation that happened after your series went on. I don't know if went on air is the right term. It was online.
Went online,
right?
yeah.
But how you sort of participated and nurtured that conversation, kept it going to your advantage.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the big bets we were making, is that we felt like if it was something people wanted to spend time with, that they would naturally share it in social media. And influencer strategies really worked well in social media, but Facebook really emerged as the platform that was the most successful, because I think people just like interacting with stories differently there than in Twitter or in Instagram. And while we have followers in both of those other platforms, Facebook has just skyrocketed in terms of kind of that conversation. And so for us, it's just been about facilitating that conversation, but then also continuing to put out new content this year. So we met with 100 small businesses and we put out their stories. They had all sorts of great advice that could be a resource to the entrepreneurs that are following us in social media. And so we've been creating memes and different resources for small businesses through our social channels to kind of keep that conversation going until we're ready to launch this next evolution this year.
Jamie?
We look for ways to insert ourselves. So to your point, we cannot control the way customers come to us. I mean, they've had an experience perhaps, and sometimes it's good, sometimes less good. We can't control that, but we can control the way that we deal with them when they do come to us, and we can ensure that we always leave them feeling as good about that interaction as possible. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. About 18 months ago, we had a customer who was running late for a flight in Boston. And he tweeted, it wasn't at us particularly, but he did actually tag us in the tweet that he was running late for his JetBlue flight and he wasn't going to be able to stop off at Starbucks on the way and get his coffee that he wanted. And as we have a 24/7 social media team based out in Salt Lake, and they picked up the message and relayed it to the customer service team in Boston, who went down to Starbucks, got his coffee, met him on the plane and gave him his coffee, right?
So cool.
That guy raved about us for weeks to anybody who would listen about how awesome we were, right? And it cost us what? Well, a lot of money because it was a Starbucks coffee, but you can't buy that kind of publicity, right?
The ideal consumer is delirious, caffeinated.
Yeah, and there was another example, it was a little bit longer ago, about 3 years ago, where a guy wrote to us and said that he was going on a trip from San Francisco to LA with his girlfriend, and he wanted to propose to her, and he wanted to propose to her on the plane, and he'd made this video about their life together, and he wanted to know if we would play it on the TVs on the plane. So we had like a week to get all this done. So he sent us the video, and we got it loaded onto the aircraft, and then we got some champagne and put that on the plane as well. And then plane takes off, sort of 10 minutes into the flight, this video starts to play on the...
And she said no?
Fortunately, she said yes, but they were so stoked about the whole thing and the way it went down that they invited everybody on the plane, all the customers, all the crew to their wedding. So, you know, these little opportunities just to do random nice things leave people feeling good about the brand.
Yeah.
So I want to get back to PayPal, because one thing when I was asking the room about the challenger, who's being challenged and who are the challenger brands, we see so much in this industry where if a brand is being challenged, then just acquire the challenger brand. I mean, and that doesn't always go so well from the marketing point of view. So I think the best recent example of this, and Kellogg would certainly say this themselves, is their acquisition of Kashi, right? Where they wanted to reach out and expand their portfolio to a more health-focused brand. The sales immediately started deteriorating, and they've been really trying to make changes to boost Kashi back up. But you've had some recent acquisitions with smaller brands. So when a big brand acquires what used to be a challenger brand, how do you maintain that sort of the integrity of the challenger brand's culture while reaping the benefits of having them be a part of the bigger company?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's very much case-by-case basis. So, like, we acquired Braintree, and you know, that company is driving forward the cutting-edge innovation of commerce, and you know, really thinking about next-gen economy, next-gen apps. You know, it's powering payments for brands like Airbnb and Uber, and you know, a lot of those brands that are pushing the envelope, and we're particularly talking to developers with that. And you know, it's really interesting as you're talking to a developer. I mentioned they hate marketing, and so it's taken a very unique approach to make sure that we keep the authenticity of that brand and the innovation halo, but then from a PayPal brand linkage standpoint, it brings a sense of trust and security that that brand will always be there. And you know, I think looking at that developer target, you know, we've gone to extreme lengths to ensure it's authentic. And you know, one of the things that I've done is we have a lot of very cutting-edge developers in the company, and I've created this group that meets every month, and the marketing team has to go present what we're going to be doing that month or that quarter, and they have complete veto power. And so it's our scariest meeting of the month because, you know, they keep us honest. And I think it's also been great because they feed ideas to us, and we've spent a lot of time just watching how developers work. And just as an example of one thing, you know, we're noticing when they browse the internet, they have their browser up, but they're also like watching the source code of all the pages go by. And we're like, well, I don't know why, but they do. And it turns out it's a pretty common thing across developers. And so we thought, wow, what a great way to reach them. So we put in an ad in the source code that never actually even showed up on the page. And it was more of an interactive thing where, you know, it was ASCII art, if you know what that is, and it was a coin. They could copy and paste that coin, put it into their browser, and it was a hidden game for them to play. And so it's little surprise and delight moments like that where I think you can keep the authenticity of the brand that the target loves, but then bring in, you know, PayPal at the right intersection.
That's really interesting example. Kind of ingenious, I can't imagine.
It's been fun, but it's
yeah.
like it's truly like getting in the head of who you're talking to.
Right. We have some time for questions from the audience. Yes, someone will come to you with a microphone, and if you just state your name, that'd be great.
Jay Mandel from MasterCard. Thanks, Amanda, for following me on Twitter. I was wondering if you did that from the stage, but you did it just before you got up there. I'm really interested in what you did with the series, and what I'd like to know is, can you talk about your media mix from a peso perspective? Paid, earned, shared, owned. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you divide it up, and what I'm really interested in how much paid amplification did you need?
Yeah, I think need and had were two different things. So we would have loved to have had more. But again, we were already taking this paid media budget, which was already small, and cutting out part of it and dedicating it to the content. So that was a big bet. We were already kind of eating into what we did have. But we had to be really finite with our paid media beyond that then so that it could be stretched further. And so we had developed a partnership with ABC and did things with Shark Tank properties and things that just really aligned with the small business, some different things with GMA. But what we were really trying to do and felt would work in paid and earned is by telling these 100 stories, we felt like we would get national attention by doing something selfless and interesting in our centennial celebration, the fact that we were starting a movement. But then we also were confident that we could get earned media in each of the 100 markets as well, which would help us towards achieving greater brand awareness. And then we also knew we could get hyper-local with each of those businesses activating their communities in social and in other places. And so we mimicked that in paid. So with the ABC partnership, we had GMA, which was mimicking the national. We had local affiliates, which was doing the local. And then we had very hyper-local, which was more of the Shark Tank properties, real niche small business stuff. And then with earned media, you can never predict what you're going to, what you're actually going to be able to achieve there. But people just organically wanted to write stories about it. We had over 600 stories written about the small business revolution in 2015. And I don't care what kind of PR professional you are, I probably could have gotten 3 written about the fact that we were turning 100. But because we did something that mattered, people wanted to learn more about it. And it's a great just kind of example of purpose-driven marketing. So I don't know if that.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yes, here in the front. Someone will come right to you. Yep, just to your right. Everyone else wants to hear your question, too.
Well, I'm pleased. David Kaplan with a new site called Geo Marketing. For Jamie, and maybe this applies across the board, I was wondering if you can talk about the evolution of rewards and loyalty programs as starting out as a challenger brand, and particularly when speaking with millennials, if there's a difference there.
Yeah, that's a very topical point. The first airline loyalty program was the American Advantage program, which was launched, I think, in 1981. And what most people don't realize about them was that due to the legacy nature of the IT systems airlines have, it's very difficult to actually know too much about your customer. All the information is geared around ticket numbers and flight numbers, and if you're Fred Smith flying today, most airlines in those days couldn't tell you if the same Fred Smith was flying tomorrow or if it was a different Fred Smith. So the loyalty was essentially a bribery platform in those days. We will give you these things if you identify yourself to us when you come to us so that we can start to build a CRM database. Now, over the years, they've evolved significantly, and what I would argue that the legacy carriers in particular have started to use them as a way to identify that top 1% of travelers and throw extreme rewards and benefits at them, really. But that leaves very little for the regular folks. And if you're a sort of bronze, silver, even gold tier frequent flyer on any airline these days, you don't really get very much. By the time all the upgrades go to the folks who are the really heavy spenders, and there's rarely room in the lounge for anybody because all the credit card holders are in there. So it's absolutely time, I think, to revisit the benefits that loyalty members get. Now, my personal view is that the best benefits you can give someone who is a member of the loyalty program is things that make their journey easier, right? So things that cut down wait times, things that cut down the amount of steps in the process they have to take, things like TSA pre-check, which ease their way through the security screening process, anything that makes that life simpler for them. To your point about millennials, we launched relatively quietly now about 4 years ago a badging program where as part of our True Blue loyalty program, when you do certain things, you get badges. So if you fly to Buffalo, you get the Buffalo badge. If you fly to Albany, you get the Albany badge. If you fly to all of those, and JFK, LaGuardia, Stewart, you get like the New York State badge. And there's all these different badges you can get. Some of them are around destinations, some of them are more achievement driven. And you would be stunned at the way that changes people's behavior. I have people who have told me that they flew into Stewart up in sort of up by West Point, instead of coming into Kennedy because that was the only badge they needed to get their New York State badge. And it's like, it's a 2-hour drive away. What are you doing? And this badge is worthless. But there's that sort of gamification element really gets people engaged with the program and engaged with the brand. There's a whole Facebook group dedicated to people talking about these badges that they have or haven't got. So it's an area of airline marketing, I think, that is ripe for innovation. The way we talk to our customers has evolved a lot in the last 35 years, and loyalty programs have to catch up.
Yes, there's a question right in the middle here.
Just David Rogers, Columbia Business School. This is for PayPal, talking about challenger brands and acquisition. Just any comments on Venmo? And it sort of has, you talked about social before, but it has maybe a different audience, a different connection, and how that is worked into PayPal.
Yeah, Venmo's an amazing brand, and you look how quickly it's growing. I think it's very reflective of how things are changing and leading edge of it. And I think when you look at the people that are using this, they're thinking about how they're moving and managing their money very differently. And they're sharing from a very social perspective what they're doing with their closest friends. And what's interesting is when we acquire a new Venmo user, the amount of additional users they bring on organically without us spending a single dollar is phenomenal. And I think it's very reflective of the product experience that they have and where they are in their journey of progression. I think a lot of what you see from that user is what you're going to see moving forward as we become more and more digitized in the way we move and manage money. I think with that brand in particular, we have a lot of exciting things, that we're thinking about this year and next year. And, it goes back to the question that you had earlier. People love Venmo, and the ones that use it love Venmo. And we're going to be keeping that a very isolated brand from PayPal, for the near term, just because of the way that people are seeing it and love it.
Other questions? And you can also submit it via the app in case something occurs to you. I'll pose a few more. We have about a minute. One of the things, you talked a little bit about buzz with these different sort of acts of kindness, et cetera. And we spoke a little bit about authenticity within brands. But one of the things that has been interesting for me as I cover the marketing space is this sort of surfeit of storytelling beyond just the sort of formal storytelling that you're doing. If I go to buy some cereal, like the life story of the farmer who was growing the wheat is now available to me, and there's so much information that's available. Is this something that you think is sort of a trend in marketing, or is this for the long term that in the effort to kind of build that authentic relationship with consumers, you're just going to be putting out more and more information about yourselves, about sort of the people involved on the JetBlue crew or what have you? Is this a fad, or is this a long-term trend to stay?
I think it is something we need to watch. I think the growth of social media has led to a massive growth in the amount of branded content being created. And there is a lot of very interesting branded content out there today that serves no purpose at all. We are not going to get into the business of storytelling for the sake of storytelling. The creative director of our agency puts it nicely when she says, everything we do that we put onto social channels for sharing is about creating an environment where people like JetBlue, feel good about JetBlue, and want JetBlue to be part of their lives at a relevant topical moment, right? They don't want to hear about JetBlue 24/7, but at that point in time when they're thinking about booking a vacation for their family, we want JetBlue to pop into their mind as, oh, they're nice people. I'll look for them when I'm going to book my flight. So I think it started out as a nice way to use the new technologies that were around. I think we've taken it and run with it probably further than we should do. And I think brands need to think much more strategically about how and why they're using storytelling.
It's become increasingly important for us, and the more that we can put real people in the center of talking to other people, it's been very effective. And especially like as we're talking to broad merchant, as we can highlight what's happening in the next gen economy and what's really on the cutting edge with very real examples from the mouth of customers that are actually using our product, there's an authenticity there that just as a brand standing alone, you can't deliver. And I think we're going to be putting more and more of our marketing funding mix into that type of content.
So we have to leave it there. I'm going to hand it back over to Gotti for the next panel, but please do thank our panelists. This was a great conversation. Thanks.